Just hey guys, here we
Okay.
are again, and today we have Brian with us. So let's dive in and get to know Brian and more about what he does and how he became an entrepreneur. Welcome, Brian.
Hey, thank you so much. So I am Brian Buck. I'm from the Seattle, Washington area, but I do serve people globally as a keynote speaker and as a coach. I have a lot of ways that I love to serve and help people. Right now, two of my main focuses are helping great leaders become elite leaders. Many people are awesome, but there's a few that actually want to take it to a whole nother level. So I help them with that so they get relationships and results because both are important. And then I'm also doing a new thing to really support everyone during COVID right now, where many people are working from home and they're realizing, I don't want to go back. And so really want to be able to help serve and support them so they could get clarity and some good action steps when they come from there.
Awesome. That sounds super powerful. And, I'm really excited. We've been, knowing each other for quite some time now. And I know that you have the stuff, right? What do you attribute that, right? You have how many decades of experience that some of us
Yeah, I've got over 2 decades of leadership and improvement experience. And I was actually thinking before I knew what today's topic was, I've been in the corporate world and serving hundreds of people and helping them grow their business, improve their customer service, improve their quality. And really, my heart's in engagement and actually making people love their jobs again. And they get that by having control of their work and recognizing they can influence, which is so huge when you actually feel like you're making progress instead of just feeling like a victim and just kind of going with what's handed to you. But something that I was thinking about is I've actually been what's called as an entrepreneur. And that is someone who is kind of like creating their own stuff within the confines of an organization. My last job as a business and quality manager, I actually had the director create that position for me. And I was able to say, hey, here's the different things we could do. We increased their sales, we changed the culture, both of the leadership team and the front line on how to actually care and have the skills to improve quality. So often people might hear of a quality problem and they just want it to go away, or they see it as accusatory instead of saying, you know what, problems are gems, problems are treasure. Bring us the problems, because when you know what problems are, then you can improve them. We improve nothing we don't acknowledge. So really seeing what the shift was in that team. So it is funny that I've kind of been an entrepreneur my whole life, even within the confines of an organization. My very first business was actually way back in my college age. I don't know if you ever heard of Cutco knives, but I was a top seller for that my first summer, just as direct sales. And then 2 summers, I ran my own office, and we were top in the nation each time, and really had a lot of fun with that. I had to get my own office. I had to recruit, do all my own advertising, and I just had a real blast. And thinking about it, I don't know exactly why I chose to go the corporate world, because I had so much fun with that. But I learned so much along the way, but everything's been additive.
Right. And that for people who, are starting out or somehow, are actually resenting the term entrepreneur. And I'm finding this more and more because there's a lot of people that call themselves entrepreneurs and they really don't do what really defines an entrepreneur. How do you, what advice do you have for people that really want to steer clear of the term, but just really love, serving? Because after all, I think that's my interpretation of being an entrepreneur, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. I've never met anyone who said, I love to serve people, but don't call me an entrepreneur. And you and I are both coaches, so I'd say, well, what is it about that word that triggers you? But I think we also shouldn't get wrapped up in words. For me, an entrepreneur is someone who creates something that didn't exist before. And that doesn't always mean we're inventing. An entrepreneur could say, hey, this works really well in the healthcare industry. How about if I bring this to the industry of spa or hotels? So we don't have to create anything, but we start to see how can we bring something that worked really well in one place and then bring it to
Right.
another one.
Or
So
improve.
similarly, I took, because I used to be an internal consultant in healthcare, and one of my main clients are the ones that I had create the job for me, and so I was able to say, in a sense, is instead of having me just be your consultant, how about you actually make me a leadership role, and we can go even deeper instead of meeting week to week or a couple times a week from a coaching perspective. Let's actually have me be part of the team, which is a very big difference. It's a huge shift. So I just think it's an entrepreneur or a server finds way that they can serve in ways that haven't been served, and you can do that internally within corporate, or you can do your own thing. I think it's about the new.
Right. And I think people really go after the term entrepreneur because, well, for the most part, people want to be their own bosses. But I
Yeah,
find that people are not really prepared, the like discipline wise, of what it takes to be your own boss. What kind of advice would you give someone, especially again, given your expertise and your decades of experience, both as an entrepreneur and in the corporate field? What can you bring from the corporate world into entrepreneurship to make it better? Like, what are some of the things maybe you've learned there that we should apply more in being our own bosses?
sure. I think I'll start with this, and that is I think this is actually a really good topic. Call it entrepreneur or not, or own boss or not. But we are entering the realm of the gig economy. And the gig economy, they even said 50% of the workplace is going to be like that by 2020. And now that everyone's working from home, most of them, like 56% of people are working from home right now. There's so many opportunities to create your own gigs. And when you're creating your own gigs, if it's being a freelancer means you're running your own business. I have an entrepreneur friend who he's involved in 3 companies, which I also think is another interesting way of rethinking about what gigs mean or entrepreneur. Is so often we say, what's the one client, or I want to work for one place. But in all actuality, you want to work for a few, like 2 or 3 different places, because it's keeping your gigs going and it keeps making things fun and interesting. So just think about that. But going back to um, how to get to the mindset, or what do you need to manage yourself? Um, Before I answer that, this is the second before I answer that, because I'd probably trying to find my way to think my answer. But I actually heard, I don't know if you know the coach, Rich Lippman, who's really good on exponential coaching. And I've been learning a lot on how to really help people take uh, impossible goals into reality. And he talks about this. But I love what he says is he talks to entrepreneurs and he said, when did you know you were different?
Oh, I love
And
that.
I think, yeah, and because when you're an entrepreneur, we do think differently. And I have always been someone who, until I did the Clifton Strength Finder, the Gallup Strength Finder, I didn't realize my number one skill is strategic. Until I read it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I am always thinking 5 years out, 2 years out. My brain is thinking where I want to be, and I'm just working backwards from there. And so I think that's one of the first pieces for you to know how to be an entrepreneur is recognize where you're different, or maybe even recognize how often am I wanting to be part of the same, because the corporate world wants you to be the same. Everything is designed that even when you get promoted, you're still within their structure.
Correct.
Nobody gets rich by working for someone else. And so I think start to challenge yourself and recognize I am worth more than relying on someone else's blessing on how much they're going to allocate towards me for what I do. So I think there's that piece of independence, and you don't have to be different from a child like I was, but I think you can recognize in yourself today that, you know, I'm through with it. I, 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 I am worth more than how I'm treated. One of the things that I help people in toxic workplaces is this whole concept of how to name elephants in the room and how to do it respectfully in a way that can actually get people to listen in a constructive way instead of a conflict way. And in the world of elephants in the room, there's this concept called normalized deviance. And normalized deviance, these are the things that we all know is wrong and it's a problem, but we've accepted it and we no longer talk about it.
Hmm.
So that it's not easy, but there's actually some very good communication skill sets you can do that I teach people on how to do it. But when we think about it from the terms of the entrepreneur, what is your normalized deviance? So often we are going, oh, I don't like it, but that's okay. This is my job, or I'm with my spouse and they treat me bad, but they give me, it's recognizing the things that we try to justify instead of listening to our heart. And so to be an entrepreneur, an entrepreneur is to go, my heart actually has valid, awesome things to say, and I need to start listening to it. I recently was sharing on another podcast the two pieces of advice I give to people is one, take advice. What's the best advice you've heard that you know will help you, but you haven't taken action on? Do that. The second thing is what advice are you telling yourself that you're not doing? Do that. So I think from an entrepreneur perspective is trust your instincts. Listen to your instincts. They've been screaming at you for a long time.
They
Take it.
absolutely have.
Do it.
Right.
So
So people who actually dare to listen to their hearts, going back to the question that I had previously, the reason I'm asking this is because myself included, sometimes because I'm more of a free thinker or I have a lot of ideas, yet I struggle to stay organized. Or if I work for someone else and I'm working on that 9 to 5 schedule, I have no problem showing up, being there, doing the job, whatever it is required of me, and getting a paid very minimal amount of money. Yet if I work for myself, sometimes I struggle to create the same structure and even validate how much I charge, how much my time is worth. But it just not to take it to that that far, because we're not talking about money, we're talking more on the discipline side of being your own boss. What has worked for you and you've learned that is needed in order to succeed as an entrepreneur?
yeah. I do it's a thing that I learned from Toyota and I've adapted for many of my coaching clients. At Toyota, they have this concept called leader standard work. And that leader standard work is a set schedule that would say, I am going to be at this huddle at this time. These are my standing meetings. And you make it visual so that way other people can know what to expect. That's how Toyota does it. I add an extra piece in there for the leaders that I coach on purposely putting in how do you want to show up as a leader? And so in there, I have things like, and like personally, what I have for me was influence someone every day. And I had generate an idea with one of my team every day. And so with those, and I recently coached a supervisor who was ready to quit, but when she put this into place, she changed the engagement of her team and she changed the way that she worked. And what we came up with is this term called precious time. is what's the precious time? So by saying these things that I want to show up with every day, you are more likely to do it because you arrange everything else around your day around those precious times. I also, as a creative person and with the family, especially from home, I also don't recommend, and this might be heresy to some people, so I think it's what works for you, but I don't necessarily say what time of day I'm going to do it. But I do say by the end of the day, I'm going to do my three precious things. So that way, if I sleep in or if my son needs extra help with school right now, because I'm homeschooling and doing all of this, I don't have to be like, my time's gone. I still know these precious things that I need to do each and every time. So I won't go to bed unless those are done. So I think doing something like that, I actually heard another version that I might consider practicing is, you might actually have seven precious things. Like seven precious things, that's going to start to take up most of your day.
Right.
So, and we can easily to
Yeah.
ourselves, oh, I didn't do it. I don't know if you've ever been on a diet like I have, where you go, I'm going to eat really well. You eat like crap at 10. You're like, well, I'm eating like crap the rest of the day. So you kind of throw everything out, right?
Yeah.
So this concept is, you might have seven things, but you say, I'm going to at least get three done every day. And you track. So that way, if you did the three of one thing, then you do the four of the other things the
Mhm.
next day. So that way, you're making sure you're always spending time doing precious things without beating yourself up.
Yourself up. Right.
Yeah. And I'd probably even add too, grace is so important as a serving entrepreneur. I'm trying to come up with a new word and not say entrepreneur. But for me, I'm a high achiever. And so when I'm not achieving because we're outside of our comfort zone, because we're in the learning zone, there's a part of me that goes, this is going slower than I want it to be because I'm learning. You and I have talked about the world of getting funnels together. It's not as easy as so many things look at, although it's much easier now. But you also have to go, okay, I am learning, I'm making progress. That is still good. Even though I'm not where I want to be yet, I'm still moving in the right direction and I'm not getting distracted in doing something else, which goes
Absolutely.
back to the importance of persistence. The only way you could be persistent sometimes is to give yourself grace, to be able to say, that didn't work, but I'm going to still keep going on. And each loop, you're learning, and each time you're growing, and recognize you're only having to learn things once. I'm not going to go through every funnel I make for the rest of my life isn't going to be like what it was like the first few times where I was pulling my hair out. It's going to be so much easier. So know that once you get to a certain point, that problem's gone away, and then you're going to have new problems
Right.
that you got to learn. So the learning you keep doing, and so I think I probably even say that's another key lesson. And I've seen this in the corporate world, seen this in life, and definitely in the world of owning your own business, gig, entrepreneur, is you're always going to have problems. There's many, many people who want to be problem free, and that is unrealistic. And there's no growth because problems are what grow you. Problems are where you find other opportunities. And also, when you arrive, once you earn $1 million, you have new problems. You're scared. Like there's more to lose when you have $1 million. You have different things that you got to handle. So problems will never go away no matter what level you're at. So the more, once again, like I did with my group and the quality thing, is embrace problems.
Agreed. And that's why, mindset is huge. And is the reason why I became a mindset coach, because like you just said, first we're struggling to start. And then as we grow, we just find new things that we need to, overcome and outgrow in that sense, because it's all on us. So let me ask you this. what is the hardest part you find in being your own boss or being an entrepreneur? And what is the most exciting part of you being an entrepreneur?
um, the hardest part, without question, is to not get excited about other ideas that I have. And that is to stay the course
Focused.
and persist, because um, it's very easy to start a lot, but it's harder to finish a lot. And so I have to literally say out loud, no, that's my trigger. I program myself that the minute I'm like, oh, I should do over here. No, because that's the only way that I can continue to make that, unless I'm specifically making a pivot for a very good reason, but I need to question myself. Am I just starting and not finishing? Or is this a true pivot that I need to do to take chance of an opportunity?
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that is, at least for me, is I'll say hiding behind I need to learn more. I just need a course. I just need to know this technique. I just need to know that. But all those are is delay tactics that deserve a no. There's so many awesome courses out there that are beneficial, but if you're doing those, like, so from a precious time, you might have a little bit of learning, but you still need progress on your business. Oftentimes the learning becomes two of your precious time slots and you don't make the progress. So you got to make sure that you're doing them in parallel, not in lieu of.
I agree. I agree. And it challenges people's, limitations and, doubts and fears that they have. And that's why so many people start. And this is part of, the imposter syndrome that, I teach and talk about quite often, is the fact that when, you put a product out there, you put your services out there, there is a chance of it not working or someone criticizing you. And I think most people are afraid of that. They,
Mm-hmm.
constantly perfect their product just to postpone that time when, they'll be criticized, or, they don't know exactly what people are going to say about it. So they avoid it.
Yeah. A couple of things on that, because I teach innovation as well. And I wish I need to find out who talks about this, but it's kind of an offshoot of human-centered design from IDEO. But there's this woman who talks about make a snappy, crappy prototype. And it says make a prototype so bad that the only thing people want to do is improve on it, come up with better ideas. And I just have embraced that since I've learned it. Is, you put something out there and then get feedback. My role as a quality manager, I think I might have shared this with you last time, but you want to know how to win every argument in the corporate world, or even as an entrepreneur? People say, I think we should do this. I think we should do this. Well, I think we should do this. And I'm raising my hand, goes, here's what 5 customers said last week that we should do. Wins every time, because it's your customer's voice that's more important than anything you can be able to come up in your head. So by putting something out there, it lets your customers react, and you learn from and you hear from. And you know what? There's going to be some people who are going to buy your beta. That's awesome, because then they're going to give you feedback on how to make the actual product even better. So it's really getting that feedback that's going to make it so much better. And I think, too, to go on about the imposter syndrome and some of the coaching that I've done, is have a core group of people that you trust to give you feedback. Everyone else's feedback is nonsense. And because if there's people you trust who are going to give you feedback with love and correction, or even say, keep on going, when you hear negative things from other people, you don't take that personally, because then you can go back to your trusted friend and say, is that true? And most of the time they're like, they're just cranky. Because hurting people hurt. So many people are negative or say bad things about other people, not because of you, but because of their own pains and their own hurts. And recognizing that, we can see with empathy and say, well, maybe there's something I can do to better reach out to them. But still, if you have a trusted group of people, family, friends, other gig workers, or entrepreneurs, like you and I are friends, and we support each other that
Right.
way. And as coaches, we are that trusted advisor to many of our clients as well. That we can tell it to them in ways that going to be helpful to them, that they can learn from and grow from, instead of realizing, you know, all of the noise out there.
Right. And, feedback doesn't mean that someone puts you down. And I want to
Yeah.
clarify that for people. It just means that there might be some areas where you have some blind spots that you could work on or that your customers need. So
Yeah.
just the way you look at something, it really what matters most is the meaning you give it. Because, for some people, feedback is like death. And for some
Hmm.
people, it's like, okay, hold on. Wow. I didn't think about it that way. So, or just the same with failure, for some people, it's like, okay, I just learned something that didn't work. Or, it's like, oh my God,
Yeah.
okay, this is it. I'm not never trying anything again. So it's all in your response. But going back to the question, what it really excites you about being an entrepreneur? The fun part.
Yeah. Yeah. What excites me, there's a lot of things that excites me, but I'll share one thing that just pops in my head.
Sure.
And it was it was something that I have a friend of mine who's an entrepreneur, and when I was talking to him, he said, "Is I'm unemployable." I thought, oh, that's funny, whatever. And then when I started coaching, while I was doing my 9 to 5, and I was just having such good interactions with my customers and hearing what the customers needed, and I was making adjustments, and I was doing that. Then in my corporate job, I had managers who were giving me advice on what to do. And I'm like, your opinion means nothing to me. The advice from our clients, our internal clients, are what matters, and our customers. But what are you doing trying to give me coaching advice when you don't know the customer like I do to be able to know what I'm trying to do? And I just went, oh my gosh, I just became unemployable. So and so I think part of that is just getting the independence. And I also see the work that I do. I don't know if you agree with this, but I actually see my business as the way of expressing my art. And it's really a form of personal expression, to be able to put myself 100% out there and just say, this is me, this is how I serve. You get all the kooky stuff like my Star Wars obsession as part of it. And being cool with, there's people who don't find that cool, but there's enough people who do.
Right.
And to
Those are the people you
truly,
want to talk to, right?
right, right, exactly. I don't
Finding
want to
your
talk to Star
tribe.
Trek fans. No, I'm just kidding. Star Trek's all right, but
Uh,
Star Wars is where it's at.
no, I agree, and that's the beauty of being your own boss, or creating
Yeah.
your form of art, whichever form that may be, whether that's coaching or music or film
Yep.
or
Hmm.
gymnastics, whatever it may be. That's the beauty of tapping into who you are inside and what really makes you tick and what you wake up being excited about in the morning, right?
Yeah. Well, one other thing to add too is I'm a believer, and when I did this thing last year called the 7 layers deep, where you say, why do I want to be successful? Why do I like doing improvement? And my sixth question on why do I enjoy improvement so much, and it's less about the business result, while important, but it's the transformation people make and that realization that they get in their hearts. And I had to do number 7. And my number 7, why do I enjoy that? And I went, oh my gosh, it's my ministry. It's what I honestly, deeply, with a straight face, feel like I am called to do. And with my faith, it's like, all right, when they're telling you this is where I want you to go, and you're doing it, it's a game changer.
Absolutely.
So
And trust it, and I think
yeah,
people have a hard time with that because we've been conditioned by playing
mm,
small for so long
yeah,
that when we hear that voice and when we trust God to lead us to the right place, or and facing the unknown, that scares a lot of people
yeah,
because they have to let go of some of the things that are making them play small. And it's just like, holding on to that toy that you've played with so long, so much that it's like gotten worn out. It doesn't You can't even play with it anymore, and
mm,
you've outgrown it, but you're still holding on to that, and instead, of going and creating your own masterpiece, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and just to drop a little Bible, God's doing new things. And the reason why the whole concept of forgiveness really is a fresh start. The past is gone
It
and they're
is.
doing a new thing. And so often we want to stay in the past. We're going to springboard from the past. And there was this great quote. I'm probably getting it wrong, but there's a singer named Tasha Cobbs Leonard. But she talks about when you're in the fog, you have to listen for the shepherd's voice. And I think that's another powerful lesson with, you know, following what you feel is in your heart, because you're going into the unknown, into the fog, and it's scary.
Right.
And to be able to say, okay, what's the voice telling me? What's my heart telling me? And then you get to whole new, wow, this is amazing.
But I think a big part, based on that metaphor alone, is trust.
Yep,
And
yep.
how do you, like, what has worked for you, and how do you develop that trust? Is there, because I think some people say, I just know it, but there are some
Mm,
people that are 50-50, and there's
mm,
fear, and there's, that trust, but they don't want to, they're rather, stay and listen to the fear because it's known versus, trusting something that they're not really sure what they trust. How do
mm.
you navigate that?
That's
Sorry, deep question.
no, no. That's a really good question. Um, Answer that keeps popping out isn't the right answer, but I say in a sense is put him to the test.
Yeah.
We don't want to test God, but it's really putting your faith to the test.
Yeah.
You have to have faith to see. You have to give grace before you receive grace. You have to forgive to receive forgiveness. Everything in the Bible says we have to go first. And I keep
Mhm.
one of my favorite things is the Indiana Jones movies. And if you know The Last Crusade, when he's going to walk across that path where he couldn't see anything, he had to take a leap of faith. And um, I think trust that. The flip side of that is recognize even when you take a leap of faith, how hurt will you actually get? Now, Indiana Jones would have died in that big pit. You and I in our business, our leap of faith might be, oh, okay, maybe some of our friends and families would say, I told you so. But you know what? We're going to learn and to be able to take a better leap of faith next time.
Right.
We would also learn, um, you know, how quickly we can bounce back and step up and try again. Are you familiar with Tim Ferriss's fear setting?
No, I'm familiar with a lot of his work, but not, no.
Okay. One of the things I love about Tim Ferriss is he says every year, and I've used this with some of my clients as well, but every year you write down the things that scare you the most and you plan to go after it. And one of the things you say, if this happens, one is how can you mitigate this from happening? So it's like, okay, if these fears or risks are there, what can you do to mitigate it? And then if it does happen, what could you do to make it better or make it go away, or how can you absorb it? And one of the analogies he gives is if you have a six-sided dice and if you roll a one, you're going to lose $500,000. But if you roll two or three, you're going to gain $10,000. If you get a 4, you're going to get 100,000. And if you roll a 6, you're going to get $10 million. So the point being is only one of 6 will actually be the bad problem no one wants. No one wants to lose, that much money. But you have to go, I actually have 5 out of 6 chances to win. So I think that's the other piece is you can trust, but still, they always say trust but verify, but trust and assess your risks. And if Indiana Jones, that I'm going to step out and I've got screenwriters and audience who don't want to see me die at the end of the movie, I'm probably going to be fine.
Right. No, but and I think one of the core beliefs, talking about trust and faith, is that a lot of people have adopted that belief that I will believe it when I see it, when it's actually the complete opposite, right?
Yeah.
You have to believe it first in order to see it. And that's where, if you are like whomever is listening to this right now, if that's one of the things you take away, is you have to walk first before you see the next step.
I love that. Yeah, it's like you're not going to get confidence until you've done something confidently.
Well, we're all about growth, right? If you look at
Yep.
the world, we are constantly transforming. And it's funny that most people, if you were to take a survey, the biggest thing that they're afraid of is change. Yet change happens every single moment.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
the difference is, are you choosing, or do you go follow your instincts and end up where you're supposed to be? Or are you just going with the masses where you're being told to be? That's the whole difference, right?
Yep. I always say what happens, if you go with the masses, you might as well just remove the M in front of that letter. Because, it is really true. I mean, I think that goes back to gig and all that is you can create your own path. Right. That might be a small path, but it's the start of a path, and you can do a path that still serves the masses within them. But recognize, this is probably something that, going back to what I talked about earlier, is as an entrepreneur, what makes you different is I often saw what everyone was doing and said, I want to do something else. And I think if you're in the masses, that should be your signal to go, maybe I should be thinking about something else. Because the masses aren't living the kind of fulfillment that we actually desire in our heart.
No, and I do think it is in some way, sort of like suicide of the soul. And I know that the word is super powerful, but something came to mind as you were speaking. And I think it was my mom who told me, I didn't even know, that actually sheep, if they follow the first one, so they go with the crowd, sort of like we do as humans. But if they go on a bridge and the bridge ends, they keep going. They follow the first. So that's literally what happens to us when we're following things that aren't like what we're called to do. It's like, are you throwing yourself in, in a hole just because someone else is doing it? Or will you be the one that says, you know what? No. It might be harder on my own. It may be hard to find my own path, but this is really what I need. So at the end of my life, I can say, you know what? I lived fully and I was the most authentic. Because I don't know where I heard it. It was funny that God doesn't ask you, why weren't you that person? He will ask you, or whatever you believe in, you will be questioning whether or not you fulfilled what was planted within you. That will be the biggest regret.
Totally. You also make me think of something else that I've experienced, especially with employee engagement. And that is You might have been in your calling, but then you get bored of your calling. And that sometimes means you're getting a new calling. So I think about, I'm an Excel wizard. I'm like a Excel magician. Like I can do all sorts of crazy stuff. And when I share people, they're like, oh my gosh, how do you do that in Excel? But you know what? That was really fun and challenging for about 5 years for me. Now I can't stand being in Excel. It bores me. So, and I think part of that is, sometimes we are like, I'm loving what I'm doing, I'm enjoying, I like my team. But then you get to a point where you're going, I'm bored with that.
Because
What's
you're no
next?
longer growing, right?
Right. Yeah. So I think that's another thing to think about, um, is what did you feel like when you were in that growth pattern, when Excel or whatever your Excel was new to you? And if you're now in the zone where you're just doing, that's another signal. And that was one of the things that made me want to launch my business. And I didn't realize this until I was reading up on high performers. But when high performers get bored, it means it's time for something else. And,
Next
uh,
level.
you know, I had a team of 200 people, and I said, I want to have an impact greater than that. This isn't enough. And everything that I did and the job that I had people create, um, I did everything that I wanted to, and it was time to move on. So I think that's the other thing too, is maybe you tap into what helped you be passionate when you're in that learning zone, and could be the signal that if I'm comfortable, it's time to get uncomfortable again in faith and trust, and you will start to see, because it just takes a few steps and all of a sudden everything starts to make sense. You see opportunities when you look for them.
Absolutely. That was beautiful and so much, got unpacked. My God, I think, as always, we can probably be here and chat
Yeah.
for hours on end without,
Yeah, I know.
ever
Yeah,
finishing up. What would you like to leave our audience with? And also, where can they find you?
sure. Um, I'm going to say what I want to leave them with is honor your fears. Acknowledge that you have fears about moving forward. So often, and I've probably been accused of ignore your fears, do it anyways. But courage is about moving forward even though you have the fears, and recognize where your fears are making you stop. So fears are okay, and you also don't want them to let you stop. So think about what can you do in spite of that. So that, I think, would be super, super helpful, because
Huge.
when you think about why people hate change is because there's fear. That's the greatest reason why there's resistance. And so figure out what those fears are, address them. Maybe you need to address, like when I did corporate stuff, I would say, let's honor these fears. And you go and talk to a group like, we fear this is going to make our work worse. So you analyze it and you go, oh, wait, we didn't think about this in our project plan. So you adjust the plan. Like, okay, what do we need to do? One of my favorite questions, maybe this is the bonus, what to leave you with, is a question of how might we? How might we make this project go forward and address these fears? So when you say how might we, you find opportunities instead of why can't we? Because then you're going to come up with all the reasons why you can't. So I call it the mighty question, how might we? So the best way to reach me is at brianbuck.org, BrianBuck.org. Someone has owned the brianbuck.com for over 10 years, so I'm a .org.
We got to take them down.
I know. I've tried, but and they're not even doing anything with the site. So,
Oh, terrible.
anyways, I know. Thank
Well,
you so
thank
much
you
for
so
this
much.
opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Take care.